Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Congregation of Ottawa. My name is Lisa Sharp, and I am the president of the FirstU Board of Directors. Information about FirstU is normally available at the welcome table at the back of the sanctuary. However, while the FirstU building is closed because of COVID-19, you can find information about our congregation on our website, firstunitarianottawa.ca. Or you can contact us by email at welcome@firstunitarianottawa.ca. As well, we usually have a hospitality hour after our service. But during the pandemic, we have been holding a virtual get-together on Zoom. Usually it's at 11:30 a.m. on Sundays. If you'd like to join us for the virtual hospitality hour, please see our website for information. Whatever your heritage, whatever your faith, whomever you love, and however you identify, today you are part of our spiritual community. Welcome. We hope you come back soon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan, and I am pleased to serve as worship associate this morning. Even though our doors have been closed since March, our congregation has remained connected and active. We continue to be a vibrant congregation with open minds, spirits, and hearts. I hope this moment finds you well. Although we find ourselves in different places, here we are together online, listening, connecting, and soon singing. Here are a few announcements. In these times, staff are working remotely and are monitoring emails during usual working hours. Phone calls are checked less regularly, so for a quicker response, please email staff. Our online calendar is as full as ever. Do look at this week's EUU, our website, and our Facebook page for a variety of announcements, including trivia nights, online bridge, discussion circles, climaction, meditation, Sunday morning forums, and information on how to get involved with the annual pledge drive. I draw your attention to an upcoming adult religious education program called Spirit of Life, led by ministerial intern Ian Hill, and a November 15th deadline for Parkway Spire submissions. Mark your calendar as well for the Canadian Unitarian Council's fall gathering in mid-November. Details are in the EUU and the CUC website events section at cuc.ca. Welcome to you all.
Bonjour. Good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend Pat Guthmann Haresch. On this Sunday before Remembrance Day, may we honor those who have served and sacrificed for this country, but may we also hold a vision for peace in our hearts, where we can wear both a red poppy and a white poppy. And so for our chalice lighting this morning, I read these words adapted from Reverend Gary Kowalski, a UU author and minister of the currently serving the Taos, New Mexico UU congregation. We pray for the peace not past understanding, the peace of children laughing and students quietly studying, of young women dancing and men flirting beneath the stars, the peace not past understanding, where no gunfire disrupts the night, where girls can walk downtown and not be afraid, where boys can turn 18 without conscription, where voices of hatred and intolerance find no hearing in the public square, the peace of decisions democratically determined, where opportunities for a decent life are equitably shared, the peace that reigns when people come together to solve their problems, in a world where national boundaries are rapidly falling away. We pray for peace in the world here and now, not the deliverance and the sweet hereafter, but for the kind of promised land foretold by prophets of old, where swords are beaten into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, retooling the economy from military to civilian manufacture, where justice will roll down like waters, unpolluted by urban runoff, bringing the oil of gladness instead of dependence on crude. And where a young child shall lead them, youth unencumbered by ancient animosities, a rising generation in an emerging planetary culture, a peace not far off, but close at hand, not a mere dream, but a better future waiting to be made real. May it be so. Let us sing the Chalice Song. Chalice, chalice, burning bright, help remind us with your light of how we'd like to live each day with love and truth helping lead the way.
In Flanders Fields is the world's most recognized and beloved of all War Memorial and Remembrance Day poems. It was written on May the 3rd, 1915 by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae during World War I while he was still at the battlefront during the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium. Lieutenant Colonel McCrae was a Canadian from Guelph and was serving as a medical doctor in the battles. One death particularly affected McCrae, a young friend and a former student, Lieutenant Alexis Heimer of Ottawa. McCrae had performed the funeral ceremony in the absence of a chaplain. The next day, sitting on the back of an ambulance parked near the dressing station, McCrae composed a poem. In the nearby cemetery, he could see wild poppies swaying in the wind. Dissatisfied with the poem, eventually McCrae tossed the poem away, but a fellow officer retrieved it and sent it to papers in England, where it was eventually published and has become the poem we love today. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly scarce heard among the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.
Good morning. My name is Reverend Ellen Bell. I am the spiritual care visitor for First Unitarian and a community minister affiliated with this congregation. This is the time when we can send our earnest hopes or wishes, which some people call prayers, to those people we care about. I invite you to think about your relationship with this community and how it can help you in the good times and in the not so good. Think about your hopes and your hurts and how it can make you feel sharing them with like-minded people. In this COVID time, when it's not as easy to get together in person, I encourage you to keep in touch with folks in the congregation and outside as well, with people you care about by phone or by Zoom or in person if you can manage it by socially distanced safely. This is the time in the service when we recognize the joys and sorrows that people have in their hearts. We do this by placing stones in a bowl of water. There are two sorrows this week. I am sad to announce the death of Hedwig Henry and the death of Trudy Kasner. On a happier note, Ron is recovering from his procedure, and congratulations to Kathy on the wedding of her eldest granddaughter. A stone of remembrance for all of those who have given their lives in war, who continue to suffer the wounds of war, and who have given up loved ones to war. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, may we remember them. Let us now join together in a moment of silent contemplation.
On this day, 19 years and 1 month ago, I enlisted in the United States military. For 15 years, I served as an Air Force aviator on the KC-10 aircraft. During that time, I had the privilege of flying various missions with pilots from the Royal Canadian Air Force. We are veterans together. It is my honor to contribute to Canada's Remembrance Day service. I would like to share a poem by Archibald MacLeish. It is hymn number 583 in Singing the Living Tradition. The young, dead soldiers do not speak. Nevertheless, they are heard in the still houses. Who has not heard them? They have a silence that speaks for them at night and when the clock counts. They say, "We were young. We have died. Remember us." They say, "We have done what we could, but until it is finished, it is not done." They say, "We have given our lives, but until it is finished, no one can know what our lives gave." They say, "Our deaths are not ours, they are yours. They will mean what you make them." They say, "Whether our lives and our deaths were for peace and a new hope or for nothing, we cannot say. It is you who must say this. We leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning. We were young," they say. "We have died. Remember us."
In the news cycle recently, there has seemed to be little space for anything but the U.S. presidential election and COVID. Trump and COVID. Biden and COVID. But there are other things happening, unfortunately. Stories of police brutality, the Halloween stabbings in Quebec, the Micmac lobster disputes, the rise in hate crimes, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. All these things are still happening, darn it. Sometimes in quiet moments, I wish I wouldn't do this, but my mind can wander to war-torn areas around the world because they are still there too. I meditate upon a place like Syria, picturing a mother and children, hold them in my heart and wonder, how does COVID impact them? How might these places manage COVID? I mean, how are they even eating and keeping shelter? So in the midst of the latest drama in the U.S. Presidential events, I Googled Syria, today's news, and my heart dropped. What came up was a headline from a couple of days ago. Children among 7 killed in Syria related to enclave shelling. The shelling comes as an 8-month truce is unraveling, and a retaliation cycle starts again, according to the report. Even a worldwide pandemic can't stop war and conflict. War continues not just in Syria, but Afghanistan and Yemen, between the Kurds and Turkey, violence in Mexico related to illegal drugs, the Armenian conflict, civil wars and insurgencies in Africa, continuing conflicts in Iraq, Myanmar, Pakistan. I can't list them all. And there's bullying and fights and petty disagreements we find ourselves in, even with those we love and care about. I think back to my childhood and all the time I spent, unfortunately, watching the TV. My dad would always say, "Couldn't you be reading a good book instead?" He was right. I guess in the 60s and 70s, I would see my share of silly shows. I don't know if you had these in Canada. Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and Gilligan's Island, and all their repeats. Even in those silly sitcoms, people could be quite nasty and backhanded with each other. Weren't they always tricking each other and trying to hide their lies and do all these elaborate things because they had done something wrong? Yes. And you ever notice that they weren't always so kind-spirited? And I saw shows where violence and death were so prevalent. The detective and police and cowboy shows, it was just nothing for people to shoot each other, right? And did you have like Mannix and Hawaii Five-0 and Mission Impossible? And of course, in those days, I would see on my family TV the ugliness of the civil rights struggle. People being hosed, beaten, shot. Images of the Vietnam War. Some of my friends had brothers and cousins in Vietnam. I always wondered if I might know the injured or dead soldiers I saw in the news. The images of the shooting of Bobby Kennedy especially and Martin Luther King Jr. are so vivid to me. I was 7.5 when MLK was shot. There's a story in my family that when I saw President Eisenhower lying in state on TV after he died in 1969, I went running through the house yelling, "The president's been shot again. The president's been shot again." That's how normalized the shooting of major figures had become in my child's mind. Violence was commonplace on the airwaves, and if anything, it has gotten worse, and we add computer games to it, right, where we're killing people all the time. But I didn't even need to watch faraway wars and shoot-'em-up TV shows. In the block right across, up the street from us in the neighborhood, in a very nice neighborhood where I grew up, someone had murdered Mrs. Thompson, a mom, a housewife. Her husband was found guilty for hiring her killer. My dad actually had been his accountant. Next door to us lived a house full of bullies. They beat up a boy from across the street so badly, apparently he was lucky to still have his eyesight. When I brought up talking about peace a long time ago with my mom on the phone, my weekly call with my mom, she said, "I guess in my lifetime there's never been peace." And then she said, "But I'm all for peace. Who wouldn't be?" But that just has stayed with me. I guess in my lifetime there has never been peace. None of us have lived in a time when there has really been true peace everywhere. War has always been going on somewhere. Violence and conflict somewhere. Just as racism never made sense to me as a child, none of this violence or hatred has made sense either. And there is this idea out there, the excuse we give ourselves, that aggression is natural to us humans, that we are innately warlike. But science explains that the biological imperative is the survival of the species. If survival is the imperative, how does murder and violence fit in? In college, I looked for answers to my questions, and while taking wonderful anthropology classes, I fell in love with the pygmies, whom my professor had lived with, a group of pygmies. Very similar experiences to how Colin Turnbull portrayed them in his book, The Forest People. He wrote the book nearly 60 years ago. when the Pygmies more fully still practiced their ancient hunting and gathering ways, which now, with the modern world so encroaching them, is so difficult for them. But back then, it was a glimpse into early human society for all. If this was true, then they didn't demonstrate the aggressive, warring nature that we usually see portrayed in depictions of early humankind. I don't know if you saw the Neanderthal exhibit at the History Museum, which dispelled a lot of the myths we had about the aggressive, warring Neanderthals. I loved how the Pygmies solved their conflicts. I think they did have a leader and a council of elders, but I don't think it was necessarily the leader who always won the day. They would have these community debates, and what's funny is the loudest person usually won the debate. And if you were mad at your neighbor, you would simply lift your hut and turn the door so you wouldn't have to face them until you cooled off. There was no cartoon-like caveman growl and showing of teeth with a stone axe in hand, only a heated debate or conflict avoidance for a minute, knowing that reconciliation with a neighbor in their small community would be inevitable and invaluable because they were so interdependent. No doubt it would be a reconciliation with laughter and singing in the way of the Pygmies. Back in college, in the context of everything else I was studying, the forest people made a strong case for me that war is not an inevitability when two peoples come together, that war is not somehow ingrained in our nature, that human conflicts needn't escalate to the level of violent war. I don't know where I found this, but a Gary C. Berger wrote that in 1960, a U.S. military research team studied ways of avoiding major war. During its research, the team fed into one of those old computers all the data on World War I. I don't know how long it took the computer to respond with, but the answer was with World War I was an impossibility. With all the data, World War I would have been an impossibility that never really happened. The computer concluded that blunders and casualties of such a magnitude could only be the stuff of fictional conjecture. It was an impossibility, not a hard reality. For the computer, war was illogical. Certainly, humans wouldn't tolerate such outcomes. Do a research on the internet, Google, and you will find that dozens of recent scientific studies have emphasized that aggression is not essentially innate, but a learned form of social behavior or reaction to circumstances based on certain contexts. Rabbi Bernard Baskin notes, violence is neither in our evolutionary legacy nor in our genes. And I think, like I did as a child, we know this in our bones. UU minister Ann C. Fox writes, I fully believe that human beings are wired for peace. We long for peace. We want and need it as much as we want and need love in our lives. I know that it seems to you that the truth is quite the opposite, she says, that in the world there is more war than peace. However, there is actually more peace on earth than war. In a Cold War speech, then U.S. President John F. Kennedy suggested, let us examine our attitude toward peace itself. Too many of us think it is impossible. Too many think it unreal. But that is a dangerous defeatist belief. It leads to the conclusion that war is inevitable, that mankind is doomed, that we are gripped by forces we cannot control. We need not accept that view. Our problems are man-made. Therefore, they can be solved by man. And man can be as big as he wants. No problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. Man's reason and spirit have often solved the seemingly unsolvable. And he continues, I'm not referring to the absolute infinite concept of peace and goodwill of which some fantasies and fanatics dream. Let us focus on a more practical, more attainable peace, based not on a sudden revolution in human nature, but on a gradual evolution in human institutions, on a series of concrete actions and effective agreements which are in the interest of all concerned. There is no single simple key to this peace, no grand or magic formula to be adopted by one or two powers. Genuine peace must be the product of many nations, the sum of many acts. It must be dynamic, not static, changing to meet the challenge of each new generation. For peace is a process, a way of solving problems. With such a peace, there will still be quarrels and conflicting interests, as there are within families and nations. World peace, like community peace, does not require that each man love his neighbor. It requires only that they live together in mutual tolerance, submitting their disputes to a just and peaceful settlement. And history teaches us that enmities, again, these are President Kennedy's words, between nations as between individuals do not last forever. We can move the door of our hut and then move it back. However fixed our likes and dislikes may seem, the tide of time and events will often bring surprising changes in the relations between nations and neighbors. And also from President Kennedy, peace need not be impracticable, and war need not be inevitable. By defining our goal more clearly, by making it more manageable and less remote, we can help all people see it, to draw hope from it, and to move irresistibly toward it. I think every day it's a challenge for us to keep our vision and hope for peace, to adjust our view of the world that war and conflict is inevitable. So I offer today just one exercise to help visualize peace and maybe keep it in our mind. I don't know if you're aware of the work of Joanna Macy. She is a respected voice in movements for peace, justice, and ecology, and has been a professor at our UU Starr King School of Theology in California. She's led workshops around the world. And there's an exercise from Dr. Macy, really a guided meditation I'd like to try with you all, if you're game, to help visualize a world of peace. Dr. Macy asks you to think about having a conversation with a child in the future. Let's say 20 years from now in the year 2040. Imagine a child you would like to impress upon, or a child you care for. So maybe if you could make ready for a guided meditation, relax, find a good place to sit where you feel supported. Maybe even close your eyes and begin to imagine the future in your mind's eye. Imagine moving forward 20 years in time. Don't worry about whether you think you'll be there or not. Don't worry about what the world might look like. Instead, imagine yourself in one of your favorite spots. And don't worry about whether it would change in 20 years. Give yourself a break and imagine it's the same beautiful spot or favorite spot that it is right now, and that you look as wonderful and marvelous as you do right now and not what you'd look like in 20 years. Don't worry about that. But imagine that in 20 years, the major crises that threatened life on Earth have been averted. Weapons have been dismantled, as have the technologies and institutions that polluted and decimated life. Those destructive patterns that were so interlocked that the great turning to a sustainable society happened faster than anyone expected between 2020 and 2040. By now, the transition seems so logical and inevitable that you take it for granted. Let that sink in for a minute, that the world has actually become more peaceful and sustainable. Sit in that moment and that vision for a moment. As you sit relaxing in this familiar spot, you see approaching a child of about 8 or 9 or whichever child or youth you imagined. He or she is eager and timid, for they have heard in songs and stories that you and your friends did way back when to save the world from disaster. You listen to the questions they want to ask you. The first is this: is it true what they say about the terrible times you lived in with wars? Were there really millions and millions of sick, hungry, and homeless people? And bombs that could blow up whole cities? Poisons in the seas and soil and air? Species dying? Could that really be true? The child finds it hard to believe. What is your answer? What do you tell them? Then he or she or they wonder, what is it like for you to live in a world like that? Weren't you sad and scared all the time? What is your answer? The child listens to what you have had to say, but also wonders, how did you keep on going and possibly live in that kind of world? What did you do to help the world change? Can you answer that? What would your answer be? The young person has listened carefully, but is restless and ready to go, as they are often. As she or he or they starts to run off, they turn back and look up at you and say, "Thank you." You watch them go. And now it is time to come back to 2020. Think about what your answers were. What is it like to live in this world? How can we let this continue? What can we do to make it a better place? How can we not make it a better place? Let us keep a vision of peace in our mind's eye, not give up the vision of a future time when war will seem unimaginable, an impossibility. Consider how we might live in these times and do what we can. Do things like vote, give our voice to the public, our truth. Be nice to each other. Why wouldn't we be? What's it worth to fight or bicker with each other? not just for us in the present world, but for the generations to come, those inquiring children. So I'll end this message with words from the activist, the Reverend Dr. Andrea Avazian. This is her poem, The Only Sermon. If we dug a huge grave miles wide, miles deep, and buried every rifle, pistol, knife, bullet, bomb, bayonet, if we jumped upon fleets of tanks and fighter jets with toolboxes, torches, unwelded them, dismantled them, turned them into scrap metal, if every light-skinned man in a silk tie said to every dark-skinned man in a turban, I vow not to kill your children, and heard the same vow in return, if every elected leader agreed to stop lying, if every child was fed as well as racehorses bred to win derbies, if every person with a second home gave it to a person with no home, if every mother buried her parents, not her sons and daughters, if every person who has enough said out loud, I have enough, if every person violent in the name of God were to find God, we would grow silent, still for a moment, a lifetime. We would hear infants nursing at the breast, hummingbirds hovering in flight. We would touch a canyon wall and feel the earth vibrate. We would hear two lovers sigh across the sea. We would watch old wounds grow, new flesh and jagged scars disappear. As time was layered upon time, we would slowly be ready to begin again. May we honor those who have sacrificed for us, those who perhaps thought they were part of a war to end all wars. May we honor them, but also let us not let go and continue to act so that we might be part of the struggle to end all wars and bring a lasting peace to the world. May it be so.
At this time in our service, we usually accept the offering. We cannot pass the baskets online, but you may go to our website or contact our finance manager to find out how you might keep up with your pledge or make a donation during these times. We give these gifts freely. We receive these gifts gratefully. We dedicate these gifts to the work of the congregation, serving human wholeness, caring for the planet, upholding religious freedom, welcoming the stranger, loving one another.
Good morning, I'm Jody McIntosh, and I've been asked to tell you about why I'm a member of FirstU. I started coming to the church about 16 years ago and have been a member for about the last 10 years. At first, it was a spiritual community for myself. I was new to Ottawa and wanted to meet some people, and I found my people. One of the first things I did at the church was I joined the chalice choir, and it was incredible how welcoming it was. At the time, I was definitely the youngest member, and they welcomed me with open arms and were so excited to have a new young member in their midst. Years following that, the choir has been such a part of my life. It's my second family. The choir threw me a little party when I got married. The choir threw a baby shower when I had my first son. They have been incredibly supportive, and I honestly don't know what my life would be without them. So that is definitely one of the biggest reasons why I became a member of the church, was to give back to the choir and the greater community of the church. Since then, I have had 2 children. Kylan is 9 and Seth is 7, and they are excited to go to church on Sundays. They like the programs, they like the children, they love the space, they of course they love the cookies, but they feel like it's a home to them, and I couldn't ask for more. So that is why I'm a member. That is why I contribute monthly to our church, because it's another home away from home for our family.
Let us close with poet, essayist, novelist, and artist Kimberly Byard Nelson's poem, "This Is How We Are Called." In the hours before the birds stream airborne with chiming voice, a silent breath rests in the pines and upholds the surface of the lake, as if it were a fragile bubble in the very hand of God. And I think this is how we are called, to cup our hands and hold this peace, even when the sirens begin, even when sorrows cry out old and gnarled, even when words grow fangs and rend. Cupped hands, gently open, supporting peace, like the golden hollow of a singing bowl, like the towering rim of mountains, cradling this slumbering and mist-draped valley. May it so be so. May we hold this peace and extinguish the chalice. Let us sing, Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life.
Go in peace. Go in joy. Go in love.